Well, first of all, I would like to thank the government of the UAE for such an enlightened vision of what's a critically important issue in society, in the world, and also to Her Excellency Ohad Al-Rumi for inviting me and for her leadership in this important endeavor. It has been said that there cannot be peace in the world until we have inner peace. And I would submit to you that unless you can find happiness within, you cannot be truly happy. Dr. Sachs mentioned in his talk about the blue zones. And as part of that, he indicated one of the most important aspects of these areas where people live to be greater than 100 has to do with social connection. And in those environments where people generally live to be over 100, what is the characteristic of those environments? It is individuals who live in an environment that they have grown up in since birth, and guess what? They are accepted for exactly who they are, with their failings, their frailties, their mistakes. They're given unconditional love. And for a moment here, I would like you, just briefly, to close your eyes. Can we do that? And take a few breaths in and out, and think of that person in your life who has given you unconditional love and has accepted you and has not been judgmental. And I would like you to just sit with that feeling for a moment. In and out. And that feeling, that warmth of being accepted for exactly who you are. And just sit with that for a moment. And I know I'm using my valuable time to do that, but there's a point to this. And if you would just come back with me. How did that feel? And I know how it felt, because when you can sit feeling that you are completely accepted, that you don't have to put on an act about who you are, that somebody can look at you and understand, even though you beat yourself up about not being good enough, that you're okay and you're loved. And it's an incredible feeling. But the problem is, in Western society, we have to put on a front because we don't live in that environment. We're around people who completely accept us. And it is an incredible source of stress, anxiety, ultimately depression, and loneliness. And as a result of that, a huge, huge negative effect on our health. Now, I'm going to talk to you about a personal story in a moment. And it relates, because I'm sure some of you are sitting there going, what is this about a magic shop, right? And the story is that I grew up in poverty. My father was an alcoholic. My mother had had a stroke when I was a child. She was partially paralyzed, chronically depressed, attempted suicide multiple times. We were on public assistance. Neither of my parents had gone to college. Now, most of you would agree that that is probably not the best environment to grow up in and achieve success. But what happened to me at the age of 12 was that I walked into a magic shop. And at that age, I was incredibly stressed. I was anxious. Frankly, I was ashamed. I carried shame with me. I had despair because I had no future. And I was becoming a very good juvenile delinquent. And what happened when I walked into the magic shop was that the owner wasn't there, but his mother was there. And this was in 1968, and terms like neuroplasticity, terms meditation, mindfulness, did not exist at that time. But this woman was incredibly intuitive, and for those of you over the age of probably 50, you would know what I mean when I describe her as an earth mother. Those under 50, look that up. And this woman knew nothing about the magic in the magic shop, but what she did know about was love. And after we talked for about 20 minutes, and this woman asked me some very penetrating questions, which I normally would have shied away from answering, I told her absolutely the truth. And she looked at me and she said, I'm here for another 6 weeks. If you show up every day, I'll teach you something that could change your life. Now, I wish I had insight and could tell you that that's why I showed up. But the fact of the matter is, I showed up because I had nothing else to do, and she gave me chocolate chip cookies. And so for 6 weeks, she taught me something, and it was 4 lessons, which I call tricks. She taught me that much of my suffering was a manifestation of stress and reacting to events. And of course, events are simply events. There's neither a good nor a bad. But what paints those events is the emotion we attach to them. And then we create a memory that has that emotional attachment. And that causes a great deal of suffering. She taught me first how to relax, because if you cannot relax, you cannot attend and you cannot be present. She taught me that the negative dialogue that was in my head was not me. I thought that that voice that told me I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good enough, I wasn't talented, was me. And it wasn't. Yet that voice was what limited me from becoming what I might be. And the next thing she taught me was that negative voice was also creating suffering. And then she taught me self-compassion, to accept myself for who I am and to change the dialogue to one of self-affirmation and one of kindness to myself. Because when I did not have that, I looked at the world with anger, with frustration. And so what I tell people is, after that interaction with that woman, I changed how I interacted with the world, and the world changed how it interacted with me. That allowed me to go to college, even though I didn't graduate, go to medical school, which I did graduate, become a neurosurgeon, which I did finish, and also become a successful entrepreneur. So much has been said about many of the topics that I'm going to talk about, so I'm going to move fairly fast. But ultimately, based on the insights that I gained from this woman, which fundamentally was about compassion and empathy. And I would tell you that without compassion and empathy for yourself and for others, you cannot be truly happy. Because you must look at others and understand that everyone is suffering on some level. Because when you do that, what that does, it connects you. And our fundamental default mode is to connect and to nurture. Because of the relationship that I developed with that woman and the lessons that she taught me, when I came back to Stanford after a period of absence, I created this center. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama was the founding benefactor because I wanted to understand what it is that motivates people to care, to be kind. And so I started this center, and as a result of our work and the work of many others now, we understand that compassion and connection is actually a fundamental part of our DNA. We are hardwired for that. The problem is we get distracted. Now, when I first got into this business, if you will, and a lot of times people ask me, why is a neurosurgeon doing this? And it's because of what this woman told me was, if you have found benefit in what I have done for you, share it with others. When I first got into this work, I had students who wanted to study compassion, graduate students. And do you know what their advisors told them 10 years ago when I started this center? Your career would be at a dead end if you focused on the study of compassion. Yet now, this textbook, of which I'm the senior editor, published by Oxford University Press, covers the entire domain of academic research in this area and is extraordinarily powerful and demonstrates the value proposition of what the Dalai Lama said. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. And this is in the context of happiness, meaning, purpose, fulfillment, and contentment. It's interesting because I did not want to write a book. I had no interest in writing a book, but I had given a talk about the neuroscience of compassion, that talk multiple times, and I was hounded by this literary agent, and I finally agreed to do it. And ultimately, this book became a New York Times bestseller, has been now translated into 31 languages, including Arabic. And fundamentally what it does is demonstrate the powerful connection between our head and our heart. How many of you know, and I think probably that what I was going to ask you, the answer was given away, that there is a strong, incredible connection between our brain and our heart? In fact, there is something called broken heart syndrome. Have any of you heard of that? And what this is when an individual is incredibly stressed, it results in dysfunction of their heart and in some cases cardiac arrest. This is the effect of stress on an individual. You have to understand that our DNA has not changed in the last 200,000 years, and in fact, we are the same beings that was on the savannah in Africa. 99% of our history was as hunter-gatherers and has been explained in those environments. If there is food, if there is shelter, you're fundamentally happy. We were not meant to live in this rapid-paced society with its demands on our time, with its demands on us, and what happens is it results in us not being present. And I will submit to you that when you are not present, when you cannot attend, as an example, it was mentioned that someone is interacting with you and they're looking at their cell phone. How does that make you feel? You're not connected. Yet it is connection that is how our physiology works at its best. As an example, to have theory of mind, to have abstract thinking, to have complex language, it required us to develop an education system that results in our offspring being taught by us for how long? 10, 15 years, in my case, 35 years with my daughter. We have to be with them. And there's an incredible resource cost of that. So what is it that would make a mother or anyone sacrifice time, energy, resources to care for their child? It is because they are rewarded. And that reward is in oxytocin. When you show care, concern, nurturing, respond to the suffering of another, it results in you feeling better, feeling fulfilled, and what ultimately happens is that autonomic nervous system, which is mediated through the vagus nerve, you can see all the organs in the body where it goes to. It is responsible for our flight or fight response. It is responsible for our rest and digest mode. When you are chronically stressed and in the flight or fight response, you cannot attend, you cannot gain access to your executive control function for discerning decision making, your creativity is impaired. But when you can shift that, amazing things happen. And what you can see is, in the upper part, the two blocks in the above, when you're in that mode, it impairs all sorts of functions. But when you are socially engaged, when you are connected, there is an openness. You are compassionate. You are settled. You are grounded, and you are being present. Now, myself and our center, as well as a number of other centers, have demonstrated that we can train people to maximize their genetic potential for compassion. And by doing so, result in profound physiologic effects. You can decrease your blood pressure, you can boost your immune system, you can decrease the expression of inflammatory hormones, a whole variety of effects that ultimately increase longevity. And this is the power of compassion, of connection. What we know is that when you look outward, when you are of service to others, when you care, when you give love, that is when you will truly have meaning in life, that is when you will transcend, and that is what will give you the deepest level of happiness. And when you are happy, you are healthy. When you're happier, it is a more healthy world. And ultimately, you have meaning in your life and you are fulfilled. So thank you.